More late game heroics. A sort of frustrating afternoon in East Yorkshire, but a good weekend. A good week overall for the Addicts. Hello, welcome into the From the Firefly podcast. My name is Callum. I think we're on 24. I probably should check the number before I come live on these things. My thing is really loud, whatever is in my headphones. Hi Sam, how you doing? Sunday evening, so sometimes it gets really busy. There we go, sorted out that volume issue. Evening, Paul. Yeah, Sunday evening. Sometimes they're busy, sometimes they're quiet, but yeah, I thought I'd just come on. Won't be too long. I don't think we learned too much yesterday. I wouldn't argue that we didn't know before before the game started. Other than the fact that flat three in midfield, to me didn't work at all. I thought that we saw a good sort of return for Rob Apter, but I think we also saw why he hasn't been starting, which isn't really a fault of his own. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then I think you saw sort of the value of Luke Berry, I think, and sort of the value of as Nathan says, right, like doing the right thing. Yeah, so just before we kind of get into it, as always, dump whatever thoughts you have in the comments. I try to bring up as many as I can. To those listening on the audio, I was chatting to a friend of mine on Saturday who was saying whenever I listen, I just hello to random people. Yeah, it's because we do it live on a YouTube on Sunday and usually Wednesday evenings. And a couple of things. It won't be Wednesday this week. I've got a work event. Anyway, before we get started on that, actually change the background behind me. A couple of shirts, nice photo. Just to improve the look a little bit. Hope people like and appreciate that. Okay, all right. Let's have a bit of a chat about the game yesterday. Firstly, it's a long day. I woke up at 5:45. I was in Hull for about 10. Ended up in the pub. Paul came and joined me later. To about 2. And then got home last night about 10:30. So it's a long one, right? It's about 2.5 hours up there, 2 hours 40, 2 hours 40 back. There's a lot of people on the trains. It's very cold up there. My dad's from not very far from Hull, so I've been up there a number of times. I went to uni up in York as well, so I was used to it. But it's a strange one, that journey, because at least the trains were on time and there were no storms, and everything was reasonably well organised. I don't know if anybody else saw sort of on the way back as well. There were quite a few players ended up on a train with Ana Hernandez and Charlie Callum, who were very gracious and sort of taking time out with fans. I thought that was really nice. Callum, by the time we got back to King's Cross, looked slightly confused as to what was going on. And then I know somebody was saying that they saw Murray Bell and Kane Ramsey as well heading towards the station. So you can tell that the players, as Nathan said, have a couple of days off. They sort of splinter off. Some will come back down, obviously, to London, and some will go to friends across the North and Midlands, whatever it is. So it was an interesting game, I think, and I think it was interesting, and I think we learned a lot of things that we kind of already knew. Firstly, the big shock for me was that is the first game I've seen Charlton play without Connor Coventry in a very long time. And if I'm honest with you, I don't think it worked at all. I think it's sort of further proof that Jones does not see Rankin Costello as a number 6. He sees him as a number 8. And I don't think docking their work, not because of Doc in terms of anything that he doesn't do. It's just that he's not technical enough to play in there. So, and I'm not blaming anyone for the goal other than Macaulay Gillespie being a bit silly on the ball. But you could see the centre backs weren't quite as comfortable, and we didn't have the out ball. You couldn't get it inside quite as well. I mean, I don't think that. For all of his wonderful qualities, which he does have, I don't think Harvey Nibbs is the greatest on the turn either. I think he's more of a sort of box crasher, and so you could just see a couple of moments, I think, in that first half, even when we were playing quite dominantly, where they didn't look quite comfortable. The shape wasn't quite right. Even if you look at the goal, which again, Mackie just needs to clear his lines there. There is a bin out ball to Bell on the left hand side, which I think he just doesn't see. But beyond that, is you can see there's a couple of players that just seem weirdly out of position. Lloyd Jones is basically at right back. You can see, Amari's sort of okay where he is, but again, he's moved over. The midfielders really aren't anywhere to be seen, and I think that it just causes a bit of confusion more than anything else, and that leads to the first goal. The first whole goal. Fair enough, it's a great hit. It's a good tackle, actually. I think McAfee's trying to just get around him. There's loads of open space, and there was, but he's got baited into doing something which you can't do at this level, because if you turn the ball over there, you're in a, teams will punish you, right? Players like Joe Gelhardt, are very, very good footballers. They will punish you if you give them the ball outside your own 18-yard box. It just happens. Phil for Costello doesn't get a chance. Can see him going back in January. He can't. We signed him permanently, Sam. So he is our player for the next, was it 3 years, 3-year contract, 4-year contract? So be interesting. I imagine they will try to get him in. I just can't imagine you pay that sort of money for a player and then not use him. It seems a little bit counterintuitive, especially if the forward that we've signed for big money is being we're trying to sort of ease him in and trying to get him minutes and get him that first goal. So I think we're just that's all right, Sam. It's not stupid. I did it earlier. I think I said to someone that we had an announced TC had an extension option. We did. We announced it in the original contract extension that he signed. He had a team option. So we all make mistakes. Happens. But yeah, I imagine we will try to ease him in, but I think it was pretty blatantly apparent why Connor plays every single week, and I think that if as I heard, if Freeman's over next week, for those 3 games, home to Swansea, home to West Brom, and then I'd assume that he got up to Wrexham. You would look at that and go, maybe a backup 6 is something that we could use in January. I definitely think we need some depth at left wing back. I think that's pretty painfully obvious. But I think yesterday sort of proved, we don't have anyone. If Connor gets himself injured or suspended or whatever it is, I think we're in real trouble in that sort of position. We made a number of changes, and we'll come to Tyrese Campbell in a little bit. Just because I think I heard some criticism yesterday, which was actually quite fair. And then I heard things about certain players I didn't think was quite fair. So we'll come to that in a second. But basically, James moved him to left wing back, brought James Bree on. So he brings James Bree on, and then moves almost Lloyd Jones to striker at some point, just to kind of knock the ball down. We just a thing from Paul before we talk about the subs. Coventry deserves a rest, but Plan B clearly didn't work. Nothing wrong with adapting formations, but yesterday's changes seemed quite radical. Connor's agent must be licking his. He must be, because Connor's got 1.5 years on that contract, right? So his agent must be going. I was chatting. I think it was to Corley on the way back from Preston. He was saying the thing about that 6th position is because it's quite sort of, and I'm not going to put the word in his mouth, but because it's quite sort of unsexy. Those sorts of players normally aren't on huge money. So I think they'll get an extension with him done anyway. But you can see just how important he is and why Nathan basically spent 6 months, whatever it was, playing in 1 yellow card away from being suspended, because we were pretty, we would have been pretty desperate without him. I think that if you're going to not play Connor and you're not going to even have Anderson on the bench, I don't think he was on the bench yesterday. You probably got to look at maybe getting him alone. If you can get him alone in League One, I think he's too good for League Two. But if you can get him alone in League One, just to play every week, I think that would be helpful for him. Um, I'm sure he's developing, training with players and all the rest of it. But I think getting him sort of games week in, week out, I think is really important at this point. Yeah, so let's going back to the thing. Nathan made the changes. He put basically 4 up front. He had Ono Hernandez and Tyrese Campbell at wing back. So it was basically 6 attacking players and 4 defenders, whatever it was. And we got the goal, right? That's kind of all there is to it. Fair play to Luke Berry. He read the flight of the ball. He gambled. It's what he does. I often refer to Luke Berry as Nathan Jones' comfort blanket of a footballer. If we go a goal down, you will see straight away Nathan Jones points to Luke Berry and tells him to go and get warmed up. It does not matter what the game is. If he's on the bench, if he can play and we're a goal down, he's getting ready. He just trusts him, right? And he's done it for him for years. He has just put the ball in the back of the net when you've been trailing or needing a goal. And, it just continues, right? He did it I know we're winning, but he got a goal in the League Cup. Lovely header. And that yesterday was all about reading that ball and going, do I think Miles is going to win it? If you get a chance, watch the post-match with Luke Berry. It's really interesting the way that he sort of explains watching the game from the bench. He's sort of like, I saw this happening and this happening and this happening here, and I realized if I came on and I went here and I came across there, right? You can see the way that he sort of analyzes the game while sitting there. And I think that's sort of the hallmark of a good sub is someone that can sort of adjust, right? Who can sort of look at that and go, okay, that's going to come there. I know to be here. I know to be. He talks about he had a great shooting opportunity actually, and it ended up being a 3/4 chance, a really good block from the whole defender. But you can see which sort of pockets of space he gets himself into, and you hope that sort of Harvey Nibbs ultimately ends up doing that. But you realise just how good a footballer intellectually Luke Berry is, whether he can physically quite do what he used to be able to do. And, obviously in his prime Luton years, I think maybe is more up for debate. But, the guy literally scores at every level that he plays at, playing in that 10 position. He's not going to be the most creative attacking midfielder in the world. That's just not his job. But I don't think we really have, that sort of archetype. So if James Jones doesn't want that in his system, right, Luke Berry's a pretty perfect player for Kerry and Nibbs to sort of learn from and adjust their games to being. And I don't think he's a million miles actually away from either Kerry or Nibbs in terms of the way they approach football. I think actually they're 3 relatively similar central midfielders. They do different things, but they're relatively similar, I think, in the way at least how they play in and around the box. And that's probably why you have all 3 of them. I've said it before, and I'll stand by it. If Luke Berry is willing to sit on championship wages, which will be, decent, and be a guy that plays for 15, 20 minutes a game, but maybe only in games that we're trailing in, I think he's absolutely, I think he absolutely, should stay. I think in the summer, actually, if Cambridge go up, I think there's a pretty obvious move for him to make there to go back to Cambridge, sort of later point in his career. Yeah, Samson's creds about 4 players on 2 goals, including Berry. Yeah, I mean, the goals are being shared around. The issue is the strikers aren't scoring enough, which is a really great segue to a player who should have scored yesterday, which is Tyrese Campbell. First one, I'm not going to blame him for it. He actually does everything right. It's a superb save from Panda, and it's so frustrating, Panda, actually. It's so frustrating because he's actually done everything he needs to do, though. He's just stuck his arm up. It's exactly the same save that Kaminsky made at Preston. Maybe you can angle it more to the corner. I think you can always do slightly better, but I'm not going to blame Campbell for that. The other ones that follow, the header that came off him, I think he probably should be doing better than that in the second half. And the one where he sort of knocks it, the ball comes over the top, and he really should be keeping that down. So I'm not going to say that Tyrese Campbell was perfect on Saturday. I don't think he was. I think sort of criticism of his lack of finishing, true. And I think at the moment in front of goal, he's struggling, right? I think it's still the game away at Cambridge United is the last time he scored, which is back in April. He hasn't scored in the Championship yet. I think he's still, finding his feet in front of goal. And, for those sort of sitting there and saying, should a player that is struggling for that starting every week, I can absolutely understand why you would say that. I thought he looked good coming on. I guess the argument, right, is that if your striker isn't getting chances, that's when you need to worry. I think that's kind of the perceived wisdom in football nowadays. But if he is getting the chances, you think one goes in and all of a sudden you're okay. I think it's a bit awkward for everybody because he is a winger, not a striker, and I think that's kind of what sort of puts people off. I think it's pretty obvious that when Jones plays Lieben and TC, that's when he brings Apter in and sort of changes it to a sort of three forward front line. You drop the two. Yes, there was two cams, but it's often a cam and an 8. You drop the number 10s a bit deeper to sort of supply the support, but really what you're trying to do is get a ball across the box, which hopefully a 6'6" striker can get on the end of. I saw a comment which I completely disagreed with, which was Lieben was lazy yesterday. I saw nothing in that. It's driving me absolutely crazy. This particular thought that seems to be going around. It's just, to me, it's just, I just don't think that that's a fair criticism to a player that I think won almost everything in the air yesterday. Did it always go to the right place? Maybe not, but I've said on this podcast a number of times he's not a target man. Yeah. Oh, the lazy miles trap. It is an endless thing that we see every single week. That he starts. It drives me nuts. If he doesn't score a goal, he's lazy, and I just don't understand it personally. In the end, actually, him being there is the reason we score. As much as I like Charlie Hughes, and I think Paul are going to sell him for 25 million or something stupid to the Premier League, either in January or next summer, and sort of solve their PSR issue. Now they got the embargo in January, so maybe you wait until the summer if he's happy to stay. But you're dealing with potentially one of the best centre backs in the Championship, who seemingly has an awful time whenever he plays against us. But basically, if you watch the corner when it comes in, Miles doesn't win it. Actually flicks off of Charlie Hughes' head, but he can't get the purchase on it because he's got a lad who's 6'6" in front of him. So when the ball kind of comes over the top, the only way for him to get there is to try and lean back, right? Lean back and get above Miles. But in doing that, he flicks it on, and Barry goes, "Thank you very much," and just sticks his chest on it. But it's not quite, I don't think that just going, "Oh, player's lazy," because I've said this before. I think one of the biggest problems that both TC and Miles have is that they don't have the world's greatest posture. They sort of walk around, sometimes hunch shoulders. They're not the most sort of, they don't really run around and sort of get the crowd into it. They're kind of in their own heads. They're both, I think, pretty shy. And I think that doesn't help them. But I don't think being shy or having your shoulders down necessarily means that you're lazy, or it means that you're not good, or any of these things. I just think that, that sort of criticism to me, to someone that's winning over 58% of his headers in a game, is, was it 58, 56, whatever it was last year? I don't know what the number is this year, but yesterday he easily won half the balls that came in the air to him. To a player that's actually not playing really to his strength, I think is just a bit silly personally. It's also in the same thing, and I'll use this one really quickly, as the is the Kaminsky criticism I'm seeing, which again is pretty endless. We got 5 clean sheets. Sure, I will come to Callum in just a second. I promise. I can see your comments in there, because I really want to have a chat about that. But this idea that we're not secure at the back, because the goalkeeper's not secure, I think is a pretty, he's not going to come for crosses. If you want a keeper that comes for crosses, you don't sign him. Nathan Jones really hasn't even mentioned him coming for crosses. I think it's pretty obvious why. He's tried to shine a shot stopper, right? I've said this before, but that's why you put 3 mountains in the middle of the defence. And so if a cross does come in, and we do let too many crosses come across the box, by the way, we are one of the worst, I think, in the division for number of crosses conceded, which, when you don't have a keeper that's particularly commanding in that sense, I think is a problem. But, it's the stats for him are fine. I just think that sometimes it's like we're never satisfied, and I understand it, right? Goalkeepers are never perfect, but I think for example, if I'm sure there'll be many people that will sit there and say, "Oh, I felt more secure with Dylan Phillips back there," which I would just find completely baffling. But if I hear another Mannion comment, I think I might blow a gasket, so I'm not going. I'm not just not going to mention it. Everyone on here knows my opinion on that particular thing. But as I say, in the same way, everybody's absolutely entitled to their opinion, and I'm wrong about many things. Right, Stuart, let's chat about Kelman. We haven't had a penalty yet. I wonder if that's a chance for Kelman, assuming he's a pen taker. I actually don't know. He was the pen taker at Orient. I think Miles is 3 for 3 as well from the penalty spot. When he's taken them for us, so it'll be interesting to see who does take them. I think Nibs actually, if Nibs is starting, Nibs is a very good penalty taker. I'd imagine he would be if fit. But once Gordon's back, that's that done. So I think we've got a couple that could, thankfully, as long as it's not TC, who's not a great penalty taker, and as long as it's not one of the midfielders who doesn't want to take one. Although I don't actually think Doherty's historical record is too bad either. The goals will come for TC and Miles. Not so sure about Callum. Yeah, I mean, it's just Callum's not a bench player. I think he doesn't affect the game at all when he comes off the bench. I said I thought he looked much better on Tuesday night. I don't actually think he was too bad on Saturday, actually, but on Tuesday night I think he looked a lot better. First goal, he makes a lovely run, which he hasn't really done. So yeah, I mean, Sam's saying it here. If my memory serves me well, May or Gordon started scoring once they took a penalty. I think it might have been no, Gordon scored against Bolton, didn't he? I think that was May. I think it was May had 2 penalties. 2 penalties against Fleetwood, wasn't it? I think were his first 2 goals. So I don't think the opportunities have been there really for Kelman. Maybe it's on Sheffield Wednesday. Can you take that shot a little bit earlier? I think that's being harsh. I still think, again, my thing with Kelman is I genuinely think that he's trying. I think he's running around, he's pressing, he's doing all the things that Nathan Jones wants him to do. And the fact that Nathan Jones hasn't really complained about it, I think tells you that he is true. He is honest about this idea that actually, I wouldn't care if Kaminsky was my top scorer as long as we're winning games. I genuinely think he believes that. It doesn't matter to him. I think last year we had a very, very clinical striker, especially for that level, but nobody else really scored around him except for everybody got 1 goal, I think, each at least. So it kind of spread around, but it was very much Gordon scores the goals. I think this year you're going to see a lot more goals from other places, and we needed a Cam that could score goals. If there's one sort of, a couple of sort of criticisms of the 10 last year. Well, I say it was Gordon and Berry, wasn't it? Really, Berry scored I think 6 or 7. So, and then Macra I think had 5. But other than that, it was kind of 1 each. And so I think that we in the summer, getting Carey and getting Nibs, hopefully they've gotten some more goals from those sorts of positions. But we need these strikers to start scoring more than 2 goals between them. They just have to. I know Gordon helps you massively when he's back. Yeah, Paul saying Cody comes. I actually agree with you. I think he is actually on the cusp, and then we have been saying it for a few games. I think I've said that as well. Again, that Sheffield Wednesday chance, it felt like the one, didn't it? Just pull the trigger a little bit. He looked like he had the right body position as well to hit that into the bottom corner. And you're dealing with a very poor goalkeeper at that time in Ethan Horvath. And the defender comes across a great tackle, but you think you just got to pull the trigger quicker at this level. You're not going to have the time, right? Because players will just slide right into it. It's like trying to play against Lloyd Jones, for 90 minutes. Everybody has a very, very, at least one very good centre back, whether you're Sheffield Wednesday or whether you're, Coventry. Everyone all the way down has got one good, really good centre back at least, and that's what makes it such a challenging division. Is that there are very few sides that, if any, that don't have really exciting players. Playing a whole side that probably will finish in the top, maybe in the top 10, but they have lots of injuries at the moment. All the rest of it, if they finished about 15th, I don't think it would surprise anyone. They've got a centre back that easily is going to go for 25 million next summer, and that's the difficulty of the Championship. maybe Bree on that one to a right foot and then saying Gordon doesn't have a great record in the Championship. And I'm not sure it'd be them. It's like, yeah, and I get that. I mean, the Coventry fans will tell you they didn't play that often for them. I think his first in the Championship was okay, actually, as a goal return. I think he still got 7, I think, last year and was a bit part player. So, you know, I don't disagree with you. I think Gordon at 34, it's a lot to ask for a player to come back from a serious knee injury, which this clearly has been, even if Nathan Jones seems to play it down and come back and just start firing the goals. But I think we're creating enough opportunities for players to be in the right position at the right time. And I just don't think that it's definitely not TC's strong point. That's not his fault. He's not a striker. And I don't necessarily think it's Kelman's strong point at the moment either. I think Kelman's better when he's sort of he's not a poacher. He's quite explicitly wanting to make a run and get the ball delivered to him rather than, there's a couple, and I think the Sheffield Wednesday one was a really good example from Nathan where he said, I need my striker to be crossing the box. It's a great ball from TC, right? You look at that and you go, you do need your striker to be crashing the box at that point. Hopefully Nathan can use the same partnership with Tanto and Kelman. Yeah, I mean, we say that. I mean, Tanto missed a 1-on-1 on Tuesday, right? And never really looked like scoring it. So we're in a thing where it's like, I just don't think any of them at the moment look as if you got. I mean, Miles was tapping on Tuesday, right? He's in the right place at the right time, and fair play to the lad, and he gets up in the air nicely and finishes it. But it's not like we're creating these sort of really, we're not creating sort of good chances for players. It just oftentimes doesn't seem to be falling to strikers, and I think sometimes that's because strikers just aren't in the right spot. And I think that's something that I think probably over the next week or so Nathan's going to have a look at and maybe adjust. You're going to have TC for the whole week this week because there's no internationals. I know he's given them a couple of days off, but I think we just need to. Yeah, as Stuart says, I'm sure we'll stumble upon a partnership soon. I genuinely think we will, but I think that we just need to be. I think a little bit of patience goes a long way. We are 6th in the Championship with 19 points from 12 games. It's not like we're in. It's not like we're in sort of a terrible position or anything. But I think if the strikers start scoring, that's when you can start to sort of dream of anything better. I think than the mid-table. Anyway, that's just where I stand with it. It'd be interesting what the week ahead looks like. Yeah, probably means just today and tomorrow morning. Probably does, Sam. I think he said give him a couple of days, so probably be back on Tuesday. Still gives him a couple of days to get out there. It's knackering that third game in the week, especially when you have 2 away days. We have this again in November as well. We go to Stoke and Coventry on the back of the Southampton home game. The EFL schedulers have not been particularly nice for us. But, for anyone that's done it, I know, Paul, you've done it this week. I'm not sure if you have, Stuart, but, we traveled 700 miles this week, got 7 points out of it. It's a good return. It's a good return. We've been to 2 difficult places, really difficult, Portman Road, and then, it would not shock me you guys at the end of the season with the only team to have won at Portman Road, and it's one of those really funky Tuesday night results that can happen. So, yeah, and that's what he's saying. We risk being left behind if the forwards don't start scoring regular. And that's probably why, for example, I don't think that Stoke will finish in that top 6 for the same sort of reason. I think that you do need strikers that are scoring. It's why there's so much concern at Norwich and so much concern at Southampton, is that for all the money in the squad and all the rest of it, they just don't have the forwards. But I think you're actually seeing that other than Coventry, kind of across the division. I know Aziz is scoring for Millwall at the moment, and they're a good side, and you can't take that away from them whether they're our rivals or not. But I think most sides have a problem actually at the moment in terms of strikers just not scoring. I don't think it's been a vintage sort of striker championship season, but we say that whole Gelhardt scored in the last 3. This is kind of pointless. As you say, we're 6th in the playoffs. You can't argue with that, and that that is the truth. Yeah, still a Manning that I can't see it either. Someone should tell Southampton. They shouldn't tell Southampton, but I'd like to tell Southampton that there's a manager actually who's up and coming. He's Welsh. He's 7 points ahead of them after 12 games, and they maybe should have a look at him. honestly, it would not shock me. I think it's entirely possible that Nathan Jones takes a newly promoted side and finishes above Southampton and Stoke, and it would be genuinely hilarious. You know that week is going to be so amped up. But talking about amped up Nathan Jones, there's two things. One, this week is against Swansea, the team that he absolutely despises more than the other. So you know that he's going to be, you know that he's going to be up for it. Gerhardt's a class player. Keep an eye on him. Yeah, my mate's a Leeds fan. My cousin's a Leeds fan. I know a lot about Joe Gerhardt. But you know that Nathan Jones is going to be amped up. It would not surprise me if we can't see us come out like a house on fire against Swansea. He absolutely will put the rocket boosters up the backsides. I think ahead of the game on Saturday. I'll try and get a Swansea fan on for the preview show this week, but we're having to move it from Wednesday. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so we've got the two home games, Sam. So we've got Swansea and then we've got West Brom. Both are winnable if you look at both those sides as away form compared to our home form. There's the Championship. Let's not overlook it. You have to take it really seriously. They're not bad sides by any stretch. I really like Samuel Lynn Jr. at West Brom. I think Isaac Price is a really good player. Swansea have a few. Lawrence Fizero, who was the former goalkeeper at Leyton Orient, who I saw many times when he was no. So they've got is it Topic up front? He's a good player, right? So there's some these are decent sides. Great that we're looking up though in more ways than one. We dropped off in 2019-20, but that was a completely different situation. We found ourselves relying too much on an 18-year-old Loney. Yeah, whilst we'll never forgive Chelsea for that incredibly mind-numbingly stupid decision to recall Conor Gallagher. We also we had injuries. For example, we let Jude Bellingham score his first goal. Right, was at the Valley. We did some really silly things that season as well, and a lot of that's not on Bayer. A lot of it's to do with the fact that the club was an absolute circus off the pitch, which it clearly isn't now. And I think that we got a lot more depth, and I think also it's pretty obvious they'll spend money in January if one, if it's wanted, and two, if they feel that they need to. And I think that's the main difference, is a combination of stability alongside having the necessary financial backing. I'm going to probably leave it about there. The only last thing to reflect on, I guess, is one, if you're watching this live, I will be on the Chronicles in an hour and a half. Come join, come have a chat. I'll be on there. I'm really interested to hear different people's opinions on that game yesterday, because I think it's a very, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what other people's perspective on it is. I hope that we're not having a bunch of overreactions, and I hope that I get asked about this Miles Lazy trope, and I don't get asked about goalkeepers. But I'm sure over the season we will. And then the other thing would be that if the season was to end tomorrow, we would have a lovely trip just down the road for a second leg at the Den, which would be exactly what I prefer not to happen. So if the football gods are listening, please make sure that doesn't happen at the end of the year. I don't think that my sanity could withstand having to deal with Millwall home and away, although that we would end the hoodoo against them in a playoff round. Right, as I say, expectation management. I still, if I'm being totally honest with everybody, I still think that somewhere between 12th and 14th, I'd be absolutely delighted with. And I think that that's absolutely possible this season. I don't think yesterday changed my mind on that. However, I think that we do. Maybe you would love the opportunity, Sam. I absolutely would not. Give me Bristol City home and away. I'll take the travel. But I think that yesterday doesn't change my mind on that at all. I think that we're tracking well. What we're doing is pretty sustainable, and hopefully we can continue over the next couple of months. All right, I will see you all either later on this evening, or I will see you next week. It's either going to be Tuesday or Thursday. I'm going to try and do it on Tuesday because Thursday's crazy, but I've got a big work event, so whether I can make it all fit. Oh, Millwall at Wembley, don't. Can you imagine how annoyed the Met Police would be about that one? I think we may all be slightly getting ahead of ourselves considering it's the 26th of October. So Nathan Jones will be going right. Let's focus on the Swans on Saturday. But we'll figure out the preview. I'm sure I'll post it on social. But till next time, have a good evening, everybody. Either see you on the Chronicles. I'll see you next week to preview the game against Swansea City. Bye.